So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, Carol, is the district coordinator from Expanded Learning in Vallejo. Thank you for joining us. Awesome. So if you're just coming in, want to prompt you to change your name as your name, organization, and your pronouns. You can see the instructions in the chat from Alea. So thank you so much for joining us today. Today we are doing our summer game plan series. This is our final workshop for this year. So we are doing continuous quality improvement with Sperling Center for Research and Innovation. And oops. So welcome again. My name is Aracelia Espinosa Mead. I am the program manager here at Partnership for Children and Youth. I just started with the organization a couple of months ago, so feeling very fresh and learning so much, and I'm happy to be representing Partnership for Children and Youth and hosting today. Just to do some quick guidelines, I know we are very familiar with Zoom, but just quickly, if you have something to say, raise your hand, or you can drop it in the chat. And if you can, remember to stay muted while the presentations are going. Thank you, Marie, for joining us from Folsom Cordova Unified School District. We still have people coming in, so if you're coming in, please make sure that you're watching the chat and also rename yourself, name the organization that you're with, and your pronouns. So we still have some summer learning resources, even though this is our last summer game plan workshop this year. We have the resources online, such as innovative staff recruitment strategies, program planning and partnerships, and we will have supporting young multilingual learners and engaging their families. That was a workshop that we did last week, so that will be coming up on the website soon. And we want to also focus in on our new TA Hub. So if you go to partnerforchildren.org/summer, you can go ahead and try to do or sign up for a TA Hub session. That would be with myself, Alea, or someone else from PCY. And we do a free 15-minute coaching session around summer programming. So if you have anything around like research, case studies, and we also have research, case studies, and planning guides on the website. So you can see the link there in the chat provided by Alea. All right, so for today, like I said, we are doing continuous quality improvement. So the really great thing about doing CQI is that we're able to assess program quality. It creates a path where systems of data collection informs the needs of your program. So this is something I've used when I was out in the field working at my different schools. So CQI also I saw help improve my program. And so like that really helped me see what were the areas that we needed to work on, what I needed to do to coach my team to make sure that I met those areas to improve my programs around coaching and around resources for families and youth. So CQI was always something that was very helpful for me when I did this process. In previous topics that we have covered, everything from staff onboarding to program operations, today's session is just highlighting the opportunity to explore how you can create evaluation plans that are aligned with research and evidence in order to understand your impact, to reflect on the quality that you're providing, identify the program's strengths and even your challenges, and develop processes for continuous improvement and long-term sustainability. It's also like kind of building your culture. Once you get this CQI process going, it then becomes part of your culture. So today's session is in collaboration with Sperling Center for Research and Innovation. We have Jen Martin and Paige Smith with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to them. And again, if you want to know more about Sperling Center, there is their website in the chat as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you all.
Good morning, everyone. Again, just appreciate you all being here. Thanks PCY for this space to support and talk about this topic. So we're going to do our best to keep this as interactive and engaging as possible. It's likely that you may have signed on just to listen and get some facts, which we will do, but also want to be able to be here to answer questions, potentially take a lot of this learning and do some application where possible. I know summer is just around the corner. For some of you, it might start in a few days. For others, it might be a few weeks. So know that this topic is one of those things where it's ongoing. It's big, right? When we're starting to talk about culture shifts and change, that can be like, whoa. But also know that we're hoping that you can even find a few small takeaways, steps that you can apply, even if your program starts, let's say, in a week, that you can start to think about and implement in regards to this idea of continuous improvement. So Paige and I are both education consultants with SCRI. That's the acronym that we use. You can see a bit here that we really work to elevate the quality, impact, and sustainability of youth serving organizations by turning evidence into action. So a lot of what we're going to share today is knowledge that we've gained from the field in our work with our other side of the house, which is Bell Excel, that supports youth and summer programming and after school programming. So taking that research, not only within that organization, but also within the field, and wanting to share what we've learned, what we also know research says as it relates to continuous improvement. So again, really hoping to just help you all kind of get some tools, some resources to elevate and strengthen your summer program, improve your outcomes, understand your outcomes, and be able to share them moving forward. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. We'll dive in. Just a quick look at our agenda. I'm going to do just a little bit of framing, talking about what CQI is, and not take too much time related to that, but want to get into some small group discussions where we'll really start to explore some components and specifics of an evaluation plan. We'll have a guest expert. She's also part of our SCRI team. That will talk a little bit more about how you can really understand your impact and share your data at the end of the summer, and then we'll close for the day. Next slide. All right, so before we dive in, just have a couple of polls to gauge kind of who's in the room with us today. The link to the poll is in the chat. So first, would just love to have a question. Okay, great. Just heard a noise. I wanted to make sure everyone was good. So would love to get a sense of who's in the room first around what your role is this summer in supporting continuous quality improvement. So you can see we've listed some positions here. Feel free to click the link to open the poll, or you can also put it in the chat. So it looks like we have someone in the chat who's also part of D, so the Expanded Learning Leadership. So I'll pause for a few minutes, let folks answer the poll. You can also see at the top there where you can answer by text. And if you are an other, according to this, would love to know a bit of who you are. So feel free to list that, name that in the chat, just to get a sense of what that other might be. Don't want you to just have to be classified here as another position. Want all representation here. It looks like we have quite a few who are in expanded learning leadership, and then those who are doing some service providing or community partners. So I think this information will be very relevant to you all. Oh, admin support, perfect. Okay, great. Key role in supporting continuous improvement for sure. All right, I think we can probably go to the next slide. This is good to see. We've got a lot of folks in leadership and some out there in the field supporting from a community perspective. So our next question is just to kind of get a sense before we jump in, what your level of confidence is right now as it relates to implementing a continuous quality improvement system this summer. So there is no right or wrong answer. It's okay to sit in whatever level of confidence you have. Just kind of want to gauge where are you right now? Where are you feeling as it relates to confidence in CQI? I love a good middle ground answer, just kind of not quite sure. Maybe it depends a little bit about what you're going to learn today, how you're feeling. Okay, we've got some higher end, some lower end, so we're all kind of in a good mix here as far as confidence goes. Well, we are hopeful today that no matter what confidence you are, we're going to be able to give you at least one or two things that will help boost you 1 point. I would encourage you to think about, beyond just participating in this webinar, like what one thing might be that you think would help move your confidence. So it might be asking a question today. It might be, taking some notes. It might be looking at a tool, just wondering if you take a minute to kind of think through what's one thing you think will move your confidence up 1 point. This webinar hopefully is one answer, but beyond that. So take a minute just to reflect, and then we'll go to the next slide. All right, so to get started, we're just going to kind of do some framing around what is continuous quality improvement. We're going to use the acronym CQI quite a bit today. Continuous quality improvement is a beautiful term, but a bit of a mouthful. So just know that as we reference CQI, that's what we're related to. And then just want to take a little bit of time to really talk about why it matters. Why are we here today? Obviously, I think many of you know it's important, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but just kind of want to get more into the specifics of that. So next slide. All right, so what is continuous quality improvement? So really it's a system that includes an ongoing process of assess, plan, and improve. So really some keywords here. One, ongoing, right? Like this is not something that you're just gonna do now and then kind of forget about. And it has kind of three key components to it. So it's really a cycle. You can see on the right here, this image. I really liked the koala bears as an image. That might be because I currently have a 2-year-old at home, and most everything I'm doing in my life is animated animals. But I like this idea of, just really thinking about this as a process. And as was mentioned early on, this might be something that starts as a task, something that you're working to implement. It's a system, but really ideally, as you start to use this effectively, it becomes just a part of your culture, just a way of being, kind of maintaining that growth mindset, right? Like we don't have it all figured out. It's still that like the power of yet, like we're going to get there. There's always something that we can be learning, that we can be evolving, changing, and growing with. So it's kind of it's a mindset space. It's also a culture piece. So again, if this is working effectively, if you're kind of being able to implement this, you really start to see staff and leadership. And I would argue what's missing here is even your stakeholders. So your youth, your families, your community partners, working together to improve the overall quality of your service. And this happens by collecting data, creating improvement plans based on that data, and then really implementing an improvement plan. So before we can really even talk about assess, I just want to mention that you'll need to take some time, and we'll talk about this in our breakout room, to really think about like, what's our goal? Who are we in this space? What are we trying to accomplish? So I think your CQI kind of fits in this idea of just overall program quality. And this kind of starts with this idea of, what does it mean for us to have a high quality summer program or a high quality out of school time program? What are those indicators of success? What are we really hoping to achieve at the end of the summer? What are we going to want to celebrate, highlight? How are we going to feel that we've met that we have done what we set out to do? So that all really happens in the beginning by thinking about your program vision or mission, setting some success indicators, setting some goals. From there, then you can really start to dive into well, so how are we going to know we're successful? And that's where that assess phase comes in. That's where you start to collect data using multiple strategies. And we'll talk more about that data collection piece in the breakout sessions. Surveys, observations, attendance, really ensuring that you're getting the information that helps you then understand, was I successful? Where maybe wasn't I as successful? And then from there, being able to look and plan and say, okay, you know what? We really hit it out of the park here. Here's an area where we can continue to improve. And that's where that improvement plan comes in. And then I think the key here is executing that plan. So really working on the improve and thinking critically about when and how that happens. Because often if you're just thinking about it in summer, so from one summer to another, there's a lot of space in between. And so really ensuring that you're thinking critically about how you're going to continue to reflect along the way, where your learnings can be applied even beyond and outside of summer, and then what that really looks like as you move into your future planning for the next year. So next slide. So just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about program quality and kind of some research and some evidence that we know as far as what defines program success. And again, this is not necessarily a fully comprehensive list. We have some additional resources that you can look at, but just want to note that our experience that in SCRI and other evidence and research that we have relied on suggests that when we really want to look at success through we can measure success through youth attendance and engagement, right? So when we know young people are coming and they're engaged, they're more likely to be learning, and participation matters, right? If they don't come, they're not gaining the quality that you're offering. We also want to look at program quality, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a second. Youth achievement, so really thinking about how are young people achieving. Often our brains, especially in school districts and schools, go directly to academics, and all of that is very important. Math, literacy, maybe you're doing science, but this also includes achievement around just other skill building. So if you're thinking about enrichment, we could use a variety of languages here. We could talk about 21st century skills, career readiness skills. You can also see we've got listed here social emotional learning skills, well-being. So all of those different spaces and places where young people are growing and thriving, being able to process through that. Next, thinking about family satisfaction and engagement. Does the youth experience line up with the family experience? How were they engaged? What was their experience like? And then lastly, teacher satisfaction and development. I think something else that's not listed here that I want to also include is, again, as I mentioned, just your community stakeholders. Did you have community partners? What was their level of experience? All of those things can really help inform your program success. So they're really key indicators. If young people are coming, families are satisfied, teachers are also engaged and satisfied, and youth are achieving, and you have overall quality in your program, you can say, yep, we were successful this summer. Next slide. All right, so kind of thinking about quality. I feel like this could potentially be its own course. So I'm gonna be brief here and would love if you have thoughts or ideas at any point, feel free to raise your hand, put your ideas, ahas in the chat. But when we think about program quality, we know a lot of different research is out there in regards to what does it mean to have a high quality program. And so you can see on the left here that we know that there are just some key features that could be included in a program to really support youth development. So psychological and physical safety, appropriate structures, relationships that are supportive, opportunities for young people to belong, again, positive social norms, integrating family, school, and community, and really having that opportunity for skill building. All those things I mentioned before. And then we also know, we also have research from the RAND study, the Making Summer Count study by RAND and the Wallace Foundation that starts to list the components of a quality summer learning program. And you'll see here that these are all sort of continue to be aligned, right? So small class sizes, differentiated instruction, and high quality instruction will really allow for there to be that skill building, that space for young people to show achievement. You can also see that there's alignment between the school year and the summer, that there's rigorous programming, that young people are active and participating, that it's a good amount of time, like a good length of time, right? One day is not going to work necessarily. I mean, it could work to get something, but really thinking critically about how long your program is running. And then you can see here that there's an evaluation of effectiveness. So continuous quality improvement is really a component and a place of overall program quality. So you all being here today and engaging in this conversation is really showing that you are starting that process of really ensuring that you have a high quality program, and you'll have very specific ways of being able to show what that looks like and how your students were able to succeed and achieve, and also where your stakeholders felt invested and where there's opportunity for growth. Next slide, please. Actually, go back, if you don't mind going back. Sorry, I forgot I was going to say one more thing. So before we start to talk about why it matters, I just want to talk a little bit too about quality standards. So you all, most of you, I think on this call live in California. Some of you might be from some other states. And this is not a pitch for any sort of quality standard. I'm not trying to convince anyone that you should sign on or join this, but I do just want to mention that some states and some programs have decided to use a quality framework or quality standards. And often CQI is one of those standards. So really having a system of evaluation to measure effectiveness. So California is one such state. You all actually have some quality frameworks and standards for OST. I think there's some specific for after school. And I also think there's some new information out there with summer. PCY is also a great resource around quality as it relates to a variety of other components within youth development. So simply put, right, having an OST or summer program doesn't necessarily guarantee effective impacts on participants. So when we really kind of take time to have a common understanding of what it means to be high quality, then you can start to really understand the specifics of what is working and where you're going to be able to support young people, their caregivers, and your staff the most. So if you're utilizing a set of standards, they can really help you define specifically what your outcomes might be. So your standards might inform what some of your goals, what your mission and vision are. And sometimes these frameworks and standards can often come with their own form of assessment. We have a tool within SCRI that we're going to share in the resources that is a kind of a quick, what do I want to say, self-assessment around program quality. So it kind of lists some key areas that we've already mentioned around student engagement, around instructional practices that can really start to kind of help you articulate what it looks like when you say, yeah, our program is great, our program is high quality, we were successful. You can really then start to say, our program is high quality because our students were 100% engaged, our teachers were naming learning objectives, our young people had learned, like said, they improved in their overall skills. They're now more confident in their willingness to ask questions. Those are those powerful statements that you can begin to make when you've really started to think about some of the components and specificity of program quality. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in our breakouts, but just kind of want to introduce that concept. Again, there isn't necessarily like a need or like, I don't necessarily want to say that it's like a best practice to have a quality framework or standard, but I do think there is real value in, and research would show that defining kind of those, we talked about earlier here, having some of these components in your program will really help support an overall high quality space. And again, the more specific you can get as far as measurement goes, I think just the more valuable your CQI system can be overall. So to kind of close this section before we go into our breakout rooms, would love to just get a sense from you all why you think CQI matters. So I could tell you why I think it matters, and I think I already have, but I'm curious to hear from you all. Why are you here? Why do you feel this matters? What are you hoping for? We did create a word cloud. So again, in that survey link that we sent out earlier, you should be able to add something here. We are a small group, so feel free to unmute yourself. Alea has put the link again in the poll. You can also use the chat if that's better. But why does CQI matter? Would love to hear from you all. And again, it's oh great, improved outcomes, thank you. Also, it's a safe space, a small group. Feel free to unmute yourself if that feels more comfortable. Yes, outcomes is getting bigger, it does. And I guess as you're writing outcomes, why are outcomes important? Ooh, nice. Good. I think some of understanding creates intentional distribution, better understanding, improvement, effectiveness. I like this word intentional. Yeah, you start to get some best practices. I would argue too that as you start to have those outcomes, not only does it help within your program space, it could also help you secure additional funding. It might, broaden the awareness of what's happening, help you potentially expand programming where necessary. Good. Look at all these words, I love it. Safety, parents, community, pivot, satisfaction. Awesome. So this shows that there is a lot of value that comes from CQI. As we know, research says that when young people attend high quality programs, they're more likely to benefit. As programs grow stronger and they can engage in this process, we can start to see programs prevent summer learning loss, boost student achievement. It can also help youth improve their socio-emotional growth, their identity, their academic achievement, and overall their just positive development. So really appreciate you all sharing. Yes, I love what just Sean wrote in the chat here, like shared understanding of the effectiveness of programs and effective distribution of resources, right? So I think all those words are key, but yes, I think this idea of shared understanding is huge, which helps even move forward that effectiveness and those distribution of resources. So perfect. Thank you all for engaging and just kind of the framing of CQI. Hopefully you learned something new. If not, got a good refresher as we now move to our breakout rooms. So we are going to have two different options for you to join for the next few minutes to really start to kind of get into the more specifics of an evaluation plan. So we believe, we've seen research and evidence that shows that a comprehensive evaluation plan is really critical to summer program quality and sustainability. It really gives you, as we said, that 360 view of your strengths and your opportunities to improve or to grow. So you can see here that there are some key ingredients to a successful CQI system. So one is that shared vision of high quality, which we just talked about. Having performance feedback, again, having that continuous improvement process, which is what we're going to talk about now. What is that evaluation plan? What's that system? And then really thinking about overall, as you develop this as a culture, what are those incentives for participation? So how do you really encourage this to happen at your site? So it can sit at the leadership level, but to really get that investment from your staff, your stakeholders, your youth, your parents, what does that process look like? So we're going to have two different breakout. The first is going to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive and conversation around that first piece of before you kind of get into your evaluate, or before you kind of really get into the assess phase. What does it look like to do your to kind of have your program vision, mission, and goals? So talking about your program vision, what those goals might be, the success indicators, what are you trying to measure and achieve, and then how you might set goals. So program vision, mission, and goals. The second is going to be around data collection. So talking about that assess space. So how are you going to get the information? What are the tools, tips, tricks? Whew, that was a tongue twister. That you might need in order to really get high quality information. And please know we're going to talk about what comes after that, the plan and improve phase. That'll come with our guest expert, Carrie. So we're going to get there. We're just going to kind of stick with that evaluation plan first. So we're going to open up those rooms. So you can choose one or the other. We'll be in there for about 15 minutes or so, and we'll go from there. So we'll see you all in a minute. And if you don't know how to join a breakout room, down at the bottom there, you've got a space where you can choose that room. So before we dive in, I have some tools to kind of share with you all to really kind of start to talk about data collection plans. We are fortunate to have our next expert who will speak in the room with us. Carrie supports research and evaluation with SCRI. So thanks, Carrie, for joining. But would love to hear from you all. Do you have specific questions? What's brought you to this space? Again, I can dominate the conversation, but would just love to hear if there's something specific that you're like, I really want to make sure we talk about this in the next 15 minutes.
I guess I can start, Jen. My name is Marie Pollock. I'm the coordinator of expanded learning for Folsom Cordova, and I'm taking over this next year. So I'm new to my position, but I've been tasked with some other things this year so far in my job. And so I'm totally new and just want to see what's out there and what other people are doing to kind of guide, the whole mission and vision and goals are already done. They're already written for me. I just need to know what to do with them and how we can make our programs better. So curious what everyone else is doing and here to listen mostly.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Edith. So I actually come from an after-school program called DFEO out in Downey. So I essentially kind of wanted to join. We do CQI throughout our school year for programs, but we also have our summer programming. So we just wanted to take the time to really see how we can hone in all the really big tips and tricks to really make it better. So that way, following the next school year, we can take that and just progress into a much more successful program.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Erika Aguirre Gomez with Catholic Charities. We provide summer programming in 2 school districts here in San Jose, Franklin McKinley, as well as San Jose Unified. And this year we're adding a charter school to our summer programming. We've done the QCAS of the summers that we provided our programming. And just here to learn, continue learning. I don't think it's part of that CQI, right? You always do the reflect, really making sure that you're doing. So just wanted to see what else is going on. I know for us, a QCAPS does take a long time for those who haven't used it, but it's really detailed and we love it. So just wanted to know if there's other tools and what everybody else is doing out, out in our state and in our country.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything you want to add, Sean? No pressure.
Let's see. Well, I support our CEO, and we have summer programs every year at each of our school sites. And I think probably one thing we could improve upon would be sort of formalizing action plans.
Mm-hmm.
Like we often have discussions about things or like post-summer conversations about what went well and what didn't, but it'd be nice to begin to develop some formal plans and reflections that we could collect year over year.
Great. Yeah, perfect. Well, the next section with Carrie is going to be really informative for you, but I'm hopeful we can touch a little bit on that during this time as well. So this is really great. So I think, my plan was to kind of show a sample resource that we're going to share with you all, which is just our evaluation guide. kind of helps you think about some of the different measurements that you might utilize, provide some key considerations and questions. So as Marie mentioned, right, like, and as I mentioned early on, really having some established success indicators, some defined outcomes and goals is going to be essential to collecting data. Because if you just go out and say, well, we're just going to get all this information, but you don't really know what it relates to or how you're going to use it, it's really going to not be useful, right? I mean, it could be useful, but it's going to be harder to find the use. That's what I should say. All information can be useful, but maybe not as useful as we'd hoped, or it may not inform us in the way that we wanted to inform us. So this evaluation guide kind of focuses on the areas of attendance and retention. So really thinking about that engagement piece. Are young people coming? How are you measuring that? Then it talks about measuring academic growth and kind of the things to consider, and then really starting to think about that stakeholder feedback. So what does those stakeholder surveys look like? And then just kind of thinking about continuous improvement overall. So I'm not gonna necessarily go into, we can talk about tools that exist within that space, but kind of just want to review and talk through and answer questions, or even if there's been some challenges. Like I know one of the questions that was posed for the webinar was like, how can you get more stakeholder input in regards to collecting feedback, right? Because again, surveys and data are only as useful as the people who use them. So if I have a staff survey and I want it, the information, but none of my staff fill it out, I'm not going to have much insight into what's going on. So let me go ahead and share this. I think I can put it in the chat for you all as well. Give me a second to copy this, and I'll chat it in case you want to follow along. It'll be shared in the resource guide at the end of this too, but I'll go ahead and share my screen. And if at any point in time, there it is. It's that green button down at the bottom, the one that's really obvious. You have questions or you want to talk about something specifically, like please let me know. So this tool, I'll go to the top here. I just want to make my window a little bigger here. 1 second. Okay, so again, this is our evaluation guide, and you can see here some of this information we talked about. We really want this to be a place where people can start to think about what we just shared, right? So how do you start to reflect on your quality, find your strengths, and move forward with continuous improvement? So where this is designed is it kind of talks about each specific thing. So first you have attendance and retention. So you can see that it has some just why does it matter? But then really starts to talk more specifically about your attendance and retention plan. So pre-program, during program, and then post-program. So I think one thing to really think about, and Carrie, at any point in time, as the expert, please feel free to chime in if you want to add something here. But I think at any point in time when you're thinking about data collection, the more intentional, and I don't want to use the word systematic, but I'm going to, that you are, the more likely you are to get the information, right? So I love here that we call out what needs to happen before the program starts, what needs to happen during the program, and then what are you going to do after the program, and then some key considerations, right? So you can see here, like the most important thing would be, what's your benchmark for attendance? What are you trying to, like, what are you hoping, how many young people are going to come out of your goal, right? So this includes like your enrollment numbers, and then it would be like how many are going to attend daily, and then overall how many are going to maintain retention, right, from the beginning of the program to the end. And processing through like what's the plan and procedures related to that. This has probably already happened for you all, because I know summer is like potentially in a week. But then being able to think about that during the program. So what's your system of tracking attendance? And I know this one feels very basic, but I just want to use it because I think all of us are doing it, but really thinking critically of how are you encouraging high attendance, right? So if you have a goal and you have a system to track it, how do you communicate it so everyone knows that it's important and they're participating in it? I think that's another key thing about data collection is, one, naming what are you striving for. So it doesn't just live with you, right? Like the goals and outcomes. This is kind of like opposite of the message of like teach to the test. Like you absolutely, in my opinion, around data want to teach to the test. Like you want everyone to know what your goal is, and so they can help you achieve it, right? So if everyone knows that you want perfect attendance, then it's very clear, and I can start to process, like, I'm now contributing to this larger goal of everyone being here every day, versus I don't know if I'm supposed to come. Like, I think they care, but I don't really know. That's probably never going to happen. Everyone knows you want them to come, but and processing through, like, how do you just keep that message going? And then post program, I think, and this is kind of key in all your data, is who's gonna do something with it, right? As you collect surveys, as you collect attendance, as you collect any information, you're gonna have, depending on your systems, a lot of things to kind of sort through. I was always fortunate in programming in summer that I had systems that would kind of help analyze things for me, so I could understand the numbers a little bit more. I had someone who was a genius at Excel spreadsheets who could help me kind of see attendance trends. There are, as districts and maybe as CBOs, you already have those systems, but really thinking about, like, who's going to start to process that information so you can start to see tangible things from it. Because just to hand over a bunch of rosters or attendance rosters at the end of the summer, there's going to have to be that entry of information, right? So I think that's kind of just some things to think about around data collection. And I think attendance is one of those where we probably already have systems in place. You can see here those considerations. I'm not going to go through all of this. I just kind of want to present some of the information. So some of those logistics too around keeping data clean, right? For attendance, it's what's your process? Maybe if it's a retention goal around when students no longer are a part of the program and they might be withdrawn, and where do they count, right? How many absences are allowed? Are there, potential consequences for unexcused or excused absences? Just really trying to think about, like, overall logistically, right? Like, what are all of these components within attendance specifically, as far as the information goes, to help us know, did we meet our goal around retention and daily attendance? Does that all make sense? Okay, does this feel helpful? Okay, perfect. Great. Any questions about attendance and retention? Anything you want to talk about more deeply related to this data collection piece? Go ahead, Sean.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
I know when you're talking about when our students are withdrawing, I mean, we know that not sometimes, usually people, families do remove their child from the program because they're going on vacation. And we don't want to discourage that. And we want to make sure if a child could be there for 4 weeks out of the 5, we'll take it. But not discourage a family not to enroll a child in the summer program if they know they're going to be out for, let's say a week or more. For us, it's mostly like, let's get them as much as we can and then do that. But I know then if we're looking at attendance and we say, for example, out of 100 children, 75 completed the program, but sometimes we'll try to do a footnote, but these children left because, it's not that they didn't come because they don't like the program, but they left on vacation. So really for us to also identify that they're withdrawn maybe the last week of summer because it was a family vacation or they went down south for a wedding. So really asking those questions for our families, because that tells a big story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point that a number only says so much, right? And so I think the more, again, the value of understanding your community, understanding the uniqueness allows you to have those asterisks or those footnotes that say, due to certain circumstances, like these students did not finish the program, not that they weren't participating. So I think that's another key thing, is to really understand the culture and what you've decided. Some programs will be the opposite of you and will say, if you can't come all 6 weeks or 5 weeks, you're not allowed to participate. Where you all are saying, no, it's important. We want you to get here as much as possible. And as you already know, not only will that, potentially impact your attendance numbers, but it could impact your other outcomes depending on if you're trying to do surveys or testing. So really thinking critically about, if families are going to leave early, how can we ensure we get the other information we want from them, so we don't necessarily lose out on their insights related to that. But yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be those Those are probably, there's probably a really fancy data word for it. I don't know, but there's always going to be those. I was going to use the word caveat, but I don't think that's the right word. Like those spaces and places where there's going to be exceptions, right? Or places where you're like, that's just not going to, it doesn't always work the way that we hope it will. So understanding beyond the number is valuable. So I just got the 6-second warning. Carrie, go ahead. I'll let you finish your thought.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to say, you know, when it comes to data collection in this context, I'm going to say context again, but context is so important. And that's exactly what you were just pointing out. You know, like Jen said, a number is a number, but there's always a story behind that number. And you guys are going to be the experts in your own data, right? Like, you know what's going on with your data, why numbers look the way that they do. And that's really important, and it's super valuable. And, you know, any additional data that you can collect in terms of that, if you can find out, you know, determine a system for getting all that data, that's going to be so helpful for you as you are, you know, engaging in your continuous improvement plan. So I just want to say context is super, super important. It's definitely something to.
All right, so just kind of piggybacking off of what Jen was talking about and the importance of a CQI, you know, framework, especially within youth development organizations, I wanted to share a tool that we kind of that we've made here at SCRI, and again, it's built off of the research with Bell Excel that talks about the importance of a comprehensive evaluation plan. All right. And so understanding that, knowing that that first comes from what is it that we're trying to do, right, in our specific program? What is the vision? What are our mission? What are our goals? And actually writing those out and establishing those and understanding that that is what's going to guide our CQI processes throughout the duration of our actual program. All right. And so like that's half of the battle, right? And then also after we figure out, okay, what is our vision? What is our purpose? How do we define those success indicators? What are some appropriate success indicators? And then how do we make it specific? I like to use this analogy. It's not good enough just to survey. You want to know, what am I going to use this information for? Asking, you know, youth or your parents or any stakeholder, you know, was this program good? Did you have fun? Is a yes or no question. And then what type of information do you pull from that, right? Is it specific enough to give you the type of feedback that you're looking for when we're talking about program quality? So just reviewing this document, going down, one of those key indicators, and when we're looking at, and again, you could have all types of key indicators within your program. They don't have to be comprehensive within this list. These are just some of the most common that we have seen within youth development organizations. But looking at, you know, attendance and retention, right? And asking yourself, you know, these key considerations. How are you making youth feel, youth, families, and caregivers aware of attendance expectations during the summer program? All right. What do those key indicators look like? What are those benchmarks that you want to set as a program goal? Understanding that your mission, your vision, your goal, and your purpose is like the North Star. Your indicators are what you're going to see along the journey, but also being as specific as possible in what do you want to see is where you will pull those jewels of information that will allow your program to continue to either maintain, build, or grow. So as we're looking at attendance and retention, you know, some of the things that you can see is that there are some suggested benchmarks here, you know, 80% average daily attendance, 80% attention rate. Those are kind of those key indicators that you can see here that shows that, you know, we are having quality program. And if we don't hit these benchmarks, then what are some of the ways that you can go about amending your program? So when just looking at this document and looking through it, Corey, I would really like to have like a conversation with you. There are also other key indicators here. We have measuring academic growth, right? So academic growth can be a key indicator. Pre and post testing, scheduling a plan, We also have stakeholder surveys, including, your kids, your parents, your teachers, who will you survey? What type of survey framework will you have? What's the capacity of your organization to get those surveys? And then knowing that those surveys are overall, the surveys and the program quality is overall, a part of a continuous and improvement plan. So it's part of the bigger picture. So just looking at this document and kind of thinking about your programs and the any questions that you might have, are there any questions that come about once you think about like what this looks like in the greater picture of your program or any program, or issues that you can foresee that you would like to talk about?
I think my biggest thing is like finding the time to do this, because I personally focus on CQI like a lot. Like I did parent surveys last year, and I read every single one, and I definitely like, internalize it and think of, oh, how can I make this better? And I even like, when I redid my registration this year, I even addressed like there was one consistent that was bad, and it was the food. And so I even like addressed with the parents, like, this is the one thing that is not in my control, so like we did read your surveys and we did improve some things, and I cannot change the food. So like for me, I'm always CQIing, but it's how to, and like even like last year I wasn't able to train my staff, and so this year I'm just knowing from what I talked to the staff about last year, like I'm able to come up with my training plan, but I even want to build some, not like, how can I want to do like a debrief with my staff at the end of this year so that I know what to do better next year. But then I want everyone to be involved in the CQI. And so I'm struggling with how to come up with this plan and be able to communicate it to my staff when like I work alone. Like I'm really doing all of this on my own, including like all the HR hiring, I'm doing all of the enrollment, like I'm doing it all. And so I'm like, how can I do this?
Build it in. And I think so it can be challenging. Time is of the essence. So in thinking of that mind frame, you create these little CQI points within your program design that allows you to collect the information that you need. So for instance, if we're talking about how do I get my staff on board of what this means and what this looks like, then CQI becomes a part of your training, your onboarding, understanding the importance of the process, and also understanding the importance of why you should do it is a part of your staff training. All right. And then also building it into the processes that you currently already have. So it doesn't need to be a plan that is totally new. It's like, where can we fit in different pieces where we can meet these goals, i.e., we have our application, right? And we want to know what type of programs do the kids want to see. Maybe we include that question into our registration application, and then we use that as we build our program design. Well, we want to know how the teachers are feeling during this point in time. We want to know, do they feel supported? Do they feel, valued? How are the operations going? Well, then maybe we develop, those questions in our weekly staff meeting. Maybe we have our staff meetings where we then poll them, figure out where we are so that we can make a plan and make those mid program adjustments. And then we can course correct before the program is over. Also, at the end, where are opportunities where we can evaluate stakeholders, parents? Is there a pickup line where every day maybe we have a parent survey? Is there a newsletter? Is there any opportunities that we can fit in parent feedback so that we can also course correct in the beginning or course correct at the end? So I think a lot of it is you can build in a system within your staff by doing like a show and prove. Always asking your staff about these quality improvements and metrics that can happen, talking about it in staff meetings, and then implementing that. And then, then modeling that same method throughout your program. But just finding those opportunities that you currently have and sliding it in there, and it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process.
That's helpful. Yeah, I'm totally someone who like, I want the fully developed plan, and then I like get angry if I don't have it.
Yeah, and your fully developed plan is going to be what's feasible for you. And that is, you already have a program design. Where are the touch points within my program design that I can start to interweave my plan together? But you're starting with, what are the goals? What are we trying to see? What is the purpose of our program? And then when you start to name the purpose of your actual program, then you can kind of drill it down into, okay, what does that look like? What does success look like? Fun. What does fun look like? Well, if they're having fun, they're coming. So attendance. Okay, that's a metric that we can measure. What does fun look like? Engagement. Okay, student engagement. That's a metric that we can measure. How do we get that information? Oh, I don't know, teacher feedback, maybe, you know, so it's really being intentional on what's our goals, what's our vision, what does it look like, what are the metrics? Now, how do we collect this information within our daily program, you know, on doing, whether it's a survey at the beginning, middle, and end, whether it's a survey at the end, whether we're pulling these feedback touch points and we're creating, you know, our plan, and then we can use that to move forward in creating a more comprehensive plan. So now it's not just all on you. It's a team effort.
Love it. It's very helpful. And I am designing my staff training right now, so I can just throw it in there.
Yes, it's like, this is important. And even engaging the staff and saying, okay, this is our mission, our vision, and our goals. What do you think success looks like? And once you get them involved in that process, then they're going to have some buy-in. Well, success looks like this. How do we get that from the kids? Well, maybe we need to do a little program design modification. Okay, now we need to test whether or not what we feel is actually working. Here are our surveys. Maybe they're smiley face, happy face, or maybe they're mental health check-ins when the kids come in. Maybe it's when they come out. Maybe you have a poster that says, how do you feel after today's sessions? Happy face, smiley face. I feel good. I feel bad. I feel mad. I feel angry. Every day you take those pictures, then that's quality improvement. You're assessing your program design and whether or not you relate that back to your mission. Are we driving excellence or creating career pathways, or what did you learn today? Like, you can pull this throughout your program design and get exactly what you want, and then you just have to bring it together.
Wonderful. It's really helpful.
I know you guys are doing a good job, and I know it can be like overwhelming just to be by yourself, but I think the mind frame is, how do I pull other people in and also make them feel valued and accountable to these mission, values, and goals? Now I can have a plan where it's not just me creating, it's us bringing it together.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of asking the staff, what does success look like? Because I already planned, part of my training is like going over the survey that we do give to parents so that they know what we're being evaluated on, you know? So that's
but what does it look like to them?
Yeah.
And if they don't see it represented in the program design, well, how can we get it there?
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that. It's a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I would just like to share a success that I remembered to record the breakout room. So as we're talking about continuous improvement, I implemented a system, I had a plan, and I have improved. So never enough time in those breakout sessions. I appreciate the level of engagement and conversation we had. Would love just to take a few minutes to kind of reflect before we move on to the next piece, just how you're feeling. What's something that potentially impacted you during this time? You can also just go rogue here and type a question you still have in the chat, open to whatever, but just kind of curious, based on what you've heard so far, as we were thinking about confidence, how do you feel right now? we've got this word cloud, but again, feel free to use the chat, and we're such a small group, you're also just welcome to unmute. And that link to the poll is back in the chat, but again, the chat is fine, or you are welcome to unmute. All right, so Sean, looks like the resource we shared was wonderful. Can't wait to read through it. So just so you all know, I think most of you actually in this space were in my breakout room, but it was the same resource in both breakout rooms. It was our SCRI evaluation guide. Just kind of poses some questions to think about that can spark your minds related to what are those key success areas, those success indicators, how might that inform a goal? And then what should I think about when I'm really processing around data collection before the program, during the program, and then after the program.
And I just want to share, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I know during our summer, we have a lot of students that don't finish the program because of the number of reasons, mostly sometimes vacation. But I liked, I think, can't remember who said it, but she said that context, right? Always putting, I think it was Carrie that talked about the context, always making sure that our number's a number. And then Jen, I think you said it beautifully, a number's a number, but there's always a story behind that number. So making sure that we know why that number is low, or if our goal was 80%, but knowing that a lot of the students, especially now with COVID, you know, they might be not in the program because, you know, someone in their household had COVID or they had COVID. So making sure that we're also documenting that context, that is really important for us to be able to tell our story. So I appreciate that, because sometimes I think we look at the numbers and we're like, oh, we didn't achieve them, but there's a reason why. And it's important to share that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that reflection. So that's a really nice segue for me, thank you, into sharing your story and understanding that context and really thinking critically about how that comes across. So Carrie, welcome, Carrie Underwood. She is our senior manager on SCRI for research and evaluation. You can read her lovely bio here, but really works hard to kind of help transform research into practice and has a lot of expertise. So we're excited to have her join us, and she's going to just take some time to really start to talk about understanding impact and that application piece. So Sean, I'm hopeful that this is targeted towards what you were thinking about, of how do we really get some of that specific that story that we can really tell and the information we can use from year to year. So Carrie, welcome. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and letting me join today. As Jen said, my name is Carrie Underwood, and I always feel compelled to make my joke, which is that you're here for an exclusive concert. I'm here to sing for you. Feel free to record, tell your friends. Just kidding. I always disappoint everyone with the fact that I am not that Carrie Underwood. But I am the Carrie Underwood who works with Jen and Paige at the Sperling Center, and I am excited to give you some tips and tricks for, planning with your data, coming up with some action steps, some recommendations, and really trying to accomplish some true movement from having your data in front of you to being able to do something with it as you're moving through your continuous quality improvement plan. And really, as we've all talked about, it's truly a cycle. And then hopefully some good takeaways about sharing your results, your plan, both from a reporting perspective, a data visualization perspective, and then some tips for how to have those data conversations. So we're all coming out of the breakout sessions where we were able to brainstorm about program vision, mission, purpose, thinking about those success indicators, setting goals, and then we talked in my breakout session about collecting data and making sure you've got the right systems, the right structures in place to do so, things to think about as you're implementing those data collection plans. So the stage is set, right? Everything is there that you need in order to move forward with your plan. And if you go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, great. So I think the text here on this slide really encapsulates that whole like, so what's next step of your plan. You've got your data, and now how are you going to use it? And as the statement here says, high quality summer learning programs do more than collect data, they use it. I want to stress just this one time, I won't harp on this forever, but I just want to stress that your data is really only going to be as good as what you've collected. Inputs matter, quality data is intentional data, and you want data that you're going to be able to work with and that you're going to be able to take action on in order to really engage in the continuous improvement cycle and continue to move forward towards those goals of having high quality programming for your stakeholders. So that said, we're going to assume that everyone has full data, they're happy with it, it's in great shape, you're ready to work with it, you're good to go. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so we're at the so now what step, and so now what step in the process. And now you're ready to make some plans, make some meaningful decisions, and then craft some recommendations with your results. So these are some guiding questions and steps to think about when you're sitting down with your data, you know, either mid-program, end of the program, whenever it is that you've got some in front of you and you're ready to take some action. So there's two buckets to think about when you're deciding that it's time to take some action with your data: immediate action and longer term action. So when we talk about immediate action, we're talking about things that are in front of you right then that you see this needs to change, or this was really great and I want everybody to know about it. You know, maybe some anecdotal data that you're getting from some stakeholders. Maybe you've just done an observation. You saw a teacher in your program who was implementing like, you know, this really cool, easy to implement instructional strategy, and you think others should know about it. That's an immediate action you can take. You can elevate that. Maybe on the flip side, you've heard that, I don't know, pick up and drop off for your students had some hiccups. Maybe an aspect of family engagement isn't going how you thought it would. Are there steps right then that you can take to try to address those obstacles? For longer term actions that you can take with your data, this would be where we're thinking about, you know, survey data, student assessment data, some like higher aggregated observation data, any sort of operational data or metrics that you've collected. You know, let's say that one of your program goals was to make sure that each student received a couple of books to take home with them as a way to provide an opportunity for family engagement, but also to give your students more chances to practice reading at home. So data pieces that could be relevant to this goal would be, you know, a count of the number of books that were sent home divided by the number of students. You could get an average for that. You could have a question in your family survey about the you know, use of the books. Did they read with their children? Did they use the books that were sent home? And let's say that the data met your expectations. That's something that you would want to elevate. You'd want to reinforce that and push that out as a major celebration for your program and your families. Of course, you're going to want to think about any steps that you can take to enhance that success, but that's something that you're absolutely going to want to celebrate. You're going to want to communicate it. You just need to have a plan for how you're going to do that. For areas where you might be looking for longer term improvement for future cycles, maybe as an example, one of your goals was to have, you know, your staff meet weekly in a PLC. You know, they could have some data conversations, they could do some planning, do some professional development. And it turns out that you weren't able to meet that goal. Your staff didn't have the time, didn't have the space to really meet consistently. That's something that maybe mid-program, you're not going to be able to stop and fix. Maybe you're like just in the thick of it and you don't have an opportunity to rework schedules or find that extra time. That's something that you can really be intentional about in future cycles. You can take steps to think about how to make those PLCs a priority for the next summer. And then, you know, you can also, as part of your reflection, think about, you know, what were the circumstances that led to that finding? And think about how you're going to address those obstacles in the future. Next slide. Okay. So there's a few things that you can keep in mind and some helpful tips that you can use to frame your thinking if you're making any sort of like more formal recommendations. If you have, you know, a report that you're writing that needs to include any recommendations, if you're creating something that you're going to disseminate out to maybe not necessarily internal staff, but maybe some outside stakeholders, funders, community groups, that kind of thing. And you're crafting more formal recommendations. These are some tips to keep in mind as you're doing that. And I think what's really interesting about these tips is that they really do kind of go back to those SMARTY goals. That framework, I think, is really going to be helpful to keep in mind as you are sitting down to craft these recommendations. So to start, you want them to align back to your CQI evaluation plan, your evaluation questions, your mission, your goals, all that good stuff. You want it to tie back. You want it to be relevant. You want to have actionable recommendations. They need to actually be able to be implemented. You don't want to set a recommendation that you can't actually do. Because then the point is to take that recommendation, do something with it, implement it later, or the next cycle, and see if it works. So it's got to be something you can actually do. You want it to be specific, just like the SMARTY goals. You want to make them clear and well-defined. The clearer they are, the easier it's going to be. Again, measurable. How are you going to know if your recommendation has been accomplished? Results-oriented. You want it to be concrete. You want it to be focused on a specific outcome. And then fact-based should really clearly be based on your data. Again, it's got to tie back to all that data that you have sitting in front of you. It needs to live in that world. Next slide. Okay, so we've talked about how to make meaning of your results and then how to make some decisions and recommendations based on them as part of your continuous improvement cycle. So now we're going to talk about some best practices around sharing your data. And this will include, just like the essentials of data sharing, tips for effective reporting, some key considerations if you're starting to visualize your data, creating charts and graphs, and then how to have those data conversations. Next slide. Okay, so the nuts and bolts of data sharing. I thought about including an image of nuts and bolts, and I was like, that's far too literal, and all these people are totally going to know what nuts and bolts are, so I don't need to include that image. So instead, we have some chevron arrows to display the crux of data sharing. So to begin, and I think these 4 arrows here are things to keep in mind whenever you're having you're developing any sort of report, any sort of presentation, you're planning meetings. These are things you really need to have in the forefront as you're kind of coming up with whatever product it is that you're creating, any sort of conversation you're going to have. So who's your audience? Who do you want to share your results with and why? And what are their needs? That matters, right? If it's an internal quick memo that you're typing up that you're going to send out, even an email, that's going to look really different than a formal evaluation report that you have to pull together with all sorts of data, methods, a lot of context. So you want to keep your audience in mind as you are developing any product that you're going to be sharing. What do you want to share from your results? What findings are you going to share? What message are you trying to communicate? That's really important too. You want to include what matters, the so what. When are you going to share your findings? When is it most useful to share your results? If you're thinking about immediate action that you can take, you're going to want to do that ASAP, right? Do you want to have a mid-program review where you are doing, a quick check to see how things are going? You want to share that data out. It's going to be helpful to share it then rather than waiting until the rest of the program is completed. Do you want to do it at the end of the program? Your timing matters. And then how are you going to share your findings? Is it going to be a one-page report, a PowerPoint presentation, a longer summative report? Are you going to do a webinar? Is this just a quick summary? Is it a quick conversation you're having with someone? So essentially, I think the key crux to all of this is exactly what do you want your audience to take away from your results? What story do you want them to get from what you're telling them? And then the next slide. Okay, so I have absolutely read plenty of reports that I did not find engaging, and I'm sure that I have written plenty of reports that were also not engaging, so I am 100% a guilty party to this. And as we all know, there's so many different ways that you can report out your data, but whatever you decide to do, whatever the format, these key tips I think are always going to be applicable. So again, you got to identify your audience. You want to know who you're trying to reach with this information. State your purpose up front, be really clear about it. Prioritize your findings. If you've got something that really sticks out and that you think is just awesome and you want to share it, put it at the top. Don't bury the lead. Let people know about it. Use plain language and avoid jargon. You want to make it as easy to read as possible. In the same vein, be concise. just get it out there, right? Use action verbs, tell what needs to be done rather than suggest. As I said before, you know, you're the expert of your data and your program. You know it best. You know what needs to happen. Tweak to meet the needs of your audience. You're going to want to think about data privacy and confidentiality. And there's ways to, you know, we call them business rules that you can apply to your data where, you know, you think about sample size. If you've sent out a survey, only 3 people took it, and they all answered differently, there's a good chance you might know how those people answered. So you're going to want to think about, you know, the size of your sample. With confidentiality, you know, if you're including any sort of quotes, you want to make sure that you've gotten permission to share those quotes because not everybody wants their words out there. And there's easy ways to do that within, you know, a survey, for example. You can ask a question like, can we share your information? Or not your information, but can we share the results of how you've answered the survey? Remember, some information is better than none. If you don't have a complete data set, that's okay. Like we said before, you can provide that context and you can add that to your story. It's gonna create a better picture if you are just providing some information than if you're not providing anything. And then, you know, include quantitative and qualitative data. Stakeholder quotes are gonna add a human touch to your story. Like we've said, quantitative data, it's great, it's a number, it's gonna tell you a lot of information, but that qualitative data, that context, quotes, those are really gonna add some heart to your story, basically. They're gonna add a human touch, and those go a long way. Okay, next slide. Okay, so you may decide that at the end of your program, you want to highlight those successes and celebrations in an impact report that you can distribute to a number of audiences. These are some examples. You can see that they look different. The one on the left is sort of like lighter on content. The text is bigger. It's really easy to read. It's really easy to digest. The one in the middle, that's a little bit heavier on narrative. Maybe they had more details they wanted to share, less numbers, more context they wanted to share. And then the one on the right has got some really great, just like infographics there that kind of catch your eye as you're looking at them. So they're all very different, but they're all sharing really great information. So again, this is where you're going to think about your audience, what will work for your data and your story that you want to tell. And then the next slide, please. Okay, so now just have some really quick data visualization tricks and tips. As you are thinking about how you're going to share out your data, you may want to include some charts and graphs. And there are some awesome resources out there that will help you make your charts and graphs just like sing, really. So there's some like really great gurus, like data visualization gurus out there. And some of the resources are listed at the end of this. So if you want to go and check out some more, totally do it. I'm also happy to provide some recommendations too, just outside of the presentation. So First big tip is put your text to work. So when you're creating a chart or a graph, you want to use text sparingly so that when you do include it, it needs to be doing its job. You don't want to clutter up your chart or your graph with a bunch of words, right? You want the data to sing. You want to include a short title because you want your chart or your graph to stand on its own. If you're in a presentation and someone takes a picture of a chart or a graph, you want them to be able to look at it later and know exactly what it is that they're looking at. So you need titles, make it short, make it snappy, make it punchy. You want your data to be labeled, you want your text to be horizontal, you want your text size to be readable, and you need to include sources too if it's necessary. But put that text to work. Don't clutter it up, but make sure that what is there is useful and it's doing its job. Next slide. All right, make it easy to read, get rid of any clutter, simplify and streamline where you can, logically organize the data that's in your chart and arrange it thoughtfully so that it's easy for the reader to understand. That's really what you want. You want comprehension, right? You spent the time making a graph or a chart, you've included your awesome data. Make sure that whoever's digesting it is going to get something out of it. Okay, next slide. Highlight the main findings. I love this one. So this really gets at the kind of like so what aspect of including a graph. You don't want to include a graph or a chart just for the sake of including a graph or a chart. You want to really highlight something something that's important, a finding that you think is really awesome. So this is where some color schemes can really be useful. You could potentially use a different color to highlight one finding. So let's say you've got a chart with year-by-year comparisons, 1 year it's stellar that you want to highlight. Put that bar, you're doing a bar chart, put that bar in a different color from the rest. Let's say the other bars are gray. The one that you want to highlight is like, bright purple. That's going to jump out, and that's going to help, tell the message that you're trying to convey. Next slide. And then finally, you want to accurately and ethically share your data. So again, make sure you're thinking about sample sizes where numbers are really small. It can possibly be easy to identify who answered in what way. So you want to make sure that the data that you're including is robust. You also just want to make sure that what you're providing is accurate, that you're not intentionally hiding any negative data, that you're cherry picking data. Not that anyone would do that, but you just want to make sure that you're making those good decisions and that the people who are creating the charts, if it's not you, are also making those good decisions. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to party with some data. These are some best practices for having data conversations. So we've got some party prep here. I think these can be applied to various audiences, internal groups, large or small, your fellow staff members, external groups and key stakeholders who might be helping you support program sustainability, who might be invested in the success and quality of your programs. But to make them successful, you're going to need to do some prep. So you want to make sure that you have enough time to really dig in where you want to dig in. So, 30 minutes, depending on how much data you have to cover, might not do it. I know it's hard to find time, but to make these really successful and meaningful, you need to have enough time to actually, put some thought into it, put some intention into it. Make sure that relevant parties and stakeholders are present. You want to make sure that you've invited and included the right people. And also, similarly to that, you want to make sure that the conversations you're having represent multiple voices and perspectives, and that they're going to help push you toward diverse, equitable, and inclusive outcomes. You will want to tweak your approach to meet the needs of your audience. Like we've talked about this whole time, you've got to think about the audience. Frame the conversations as opportunities to look forward rather than any sort of gotcha moment. I think sometimes with data, we think about we're just looking for what went wrong. That's not it at all. You want to think about what went really well, because things will go well. You're going to have some great successes, and then you're going to have areas where you can improve. It's not necessarily about looking back and thinking oh, this is where we messed up, but okay, this is what happened. Let's move forward. And then finally, just have everything ready to go. It's going to make things easier. People are going to be able to just flip through whatever they need to flip through, any charts or graphs, all that context, have it ready to go. Next slide. Okay, and then our party agenda. Again, you always want to celebrate those successes. Start on a high note, think about and reflect on what went well, because things are going to go well. Again, they're not gotcha moments. They're just finding where things went wrong. You want to honor your successes. And then, you can identify the places in the data where there might be room for improvement or where you faced some challenges. And depending on who you're working with in this data conversation, those people might be really able to help dig in and think about that context for where maybe things went amiss. Just like you were talking about with attendance data. You might look at the number and say, oh man, this didn't look great. But you've got somebody there who knew exactly what was going on with the students who weren't there for the whole summer, and they can provide that context, and you can dig into that a little bit more. So again, it's really important to frame these conversations as ways to move forward rather than any sort of gotcha moment. And then finally, I think these are really great. You want to make space for any sort of open-ended questions that are going to encourage conversation and reflection. So ideally, the participants in your data conversation are going to be invested in the success of your program. They want to engage in that continuous quality improvement initiative, and asking questions that will help them reflect on those results and expand their thinking a bit will go a long way. So, what surprised you about the results? Is there an alternate explanation for, that we haven't considered yet? Any biases that we should think about? What story is the data telling you? Because the story that the data is telling me might be different from what it's telling you. So getting all those voices there is super, super important. And then the next slide is CQI in practice.
Yeah, I moved the resources to the end, so we'll touch base on those. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Great. Well, thank you, Carrie. Any other? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just know your last slide. I moved it on you. That being said, okay. So here we are. we have gone through the CQI. There's a lot there, and appreciate, Carrie, your wrapping us up with your expertise on sharing that data, really putting it to use. Because again, as we think about a process, right, like a key element of being able to move in the improvement process, right? If we just get information and one or two of us look at it and then we say, yeah, that was good, and then next year comes and we haven't taken some time to share the information to others, or even bring it back out again to say, okay, what did we do last year again? This process is just gonna really be for nothing. So to kind of wrap up, I do just want to say we included several resources that will be shared out. They're in this slide deck as well. So we have some just additional tools that live on the SCRI side in regards to evaluation, sharing your data. I did include some links to some quality frameworks if you're thinking on standards, California specifically, but also if you're just kind of curious what that looks like, I encourage you, to just kind of dive further. Again, thinking of quality improvement systems as one element of your program quality. And then Carrie, again, included some additional resources specifically for understanding your impact and sharing your data. We are obviously going to be available. You can reach out to us if you have additional questions related to continuous improvement, evaluation, etc. So just to kind of do a final reflection here in this process of continuous improvement, would love to hear via a Jamboard if you're interested. Again, if I'm throwing way too many tools at you and you're just like, what happened to the chat? Chat. Or unmute yourself. Curious to know what's something that you've learned. But more importantly, what are you going to do? One thing that you are going to do today, tomorrow, in the next week, or even during your program to start to move this work forward. And it can be anything. So I'd love just to hear either both something you've learned and what you're going to do, or really more importantly, just curious, what's one thing you're going to do to either boost that confidence or move this work forward? Because we've discovered throughout today its value in the work that we're doing with youth this summer and with the adults and stakeholders that we're impacting. So feel free to use the chat, use the Jamboard, or unmute. We can just go classic, use our voice if we want. Oh, does it really? We tested this, Corey. Shoot. Hold on. Let me see what I can do here. So what happens? Think you got it all set up in your technology, and then here we are. Yeah, it says public on the web. Oh, I see. I got it. I fixed it. All right, it's fixed. Key buttons there. Thank you, Corey. Now you should all be able to reflect on the Jamboard if you want. Refresh. Yep, here we go. And if you're not familiar with the Jamboard, on the left here, you'll see some different options. I think the easiest option is to click the little box there, that sticky note. Thanks for whoever's hovering over that. And you can add your thought via sticky note, and you can drag it on the page to share your notes. You can also just add text directly to the board. There's no right or wrong way, plenty of options. Add pictures, shapes. Great. So having a data party, love it. Use question prompts to guide discussion, love it. Deal of visualization tips, perfect, that we learned. Include more CQI work in my staff training, so not managing it alone. Absolutely, this is very much a team effort. One person, I would argue, could do it alone. But the more that you can engage as a team in this work, the better. I think it just makes it that early investment can really help support that. So reviewing the guide for summer school, look for similar guides and other topics. Great. Use the presenting information for an infographic. I have to have finished for tomorrow. Excellent. Real-time relevance here. Love it. Yeah, in-depth plans and to successfully implement them. Great. So this is, Sean, were you going to say something? Oh, okay. Keep them coming. As we said, before I pass it back to Alea, really appreciate you all engaging. Know that this is really, as we've said, an ongoing process. And these are, implementing one or two things along the way can really start to just change your program culture, your impact over time. So thank you for your engagement, your investment in this work and in our youth and our communities. And just in light of everything, just appreciate your willingness to work with youth and support them and each other. So we wish you a well summer, a safe summer, and I'll pass it back to Alea to close us out. Thank you, Paige, and thank you, Carrie, as well.
And actually, Adesali is going to close us today.
Yes, so I'll go ahead and take it. I know that you all have been really participating today. We have a lot of participation tools to use. So we also want to ask if you can share one success or outcome you are working towards in your summer program. Go ahead, throw it in the chat. It'll just be a quick reflection. You can share it in there. So yeah, we want to know share one success outcome you are working towards in your summer program. When I was in the field, attendance was super huge for me. So that was something that I was always thinking, yes, tracking attendance and tracking retention. That is something that was part of my CQI plans as well, Sean. So I know that's always very helpful. And then as you continue to put your reflections in the chat, I'm just going to move us along. America says, making sure that our students are learning and having fun. So really appreciate that. That's super fun. And you can also do that through surveys. Frontline staff that are better prepared to provide a safe and engaging environment for youth. Thank you for sharing that, Corey. We want to make sure that the staff in the space are equipped to making our students feel safe. And that's how we keep them engaged and attendance high. So we want to thank Sperling Center for Research and Innovation for putting this together. You all have really brought in lots of tools and have partnered with PCY over the last few months, providing these different summer game plan sessions. So your support and resources are highly, highly valued. And we also want to thank California Collaborative for Educational Excellence for helping us put these summer game plan workshops on for everybody to use. And again, I want to bring you back to the summer learning resources that we introduced in the beginning. You will find different recordings and resources on our website. I also want to highlight the Summer TA Hub. Again, it's a 15-minute coaching session. And you will also have Paige and Jen from SARI as options to choose for this 15-minute coaching session, as well as Jess, also from SARI, myself, and Alea, that we can help you think about preparing for summer, making sure that you have all the tools to be ready for that. It's right around the corner. Please come through and ask us for support. You can also find some research, case studies, and planning guides on partnerforchildren.org/summer. And then these are all the amazing resources SARI, oops, my mouse pad is being super sensitive, all the resources that we'll be sharing as well. So just want to go through them and also from Carrie as well, from Quality Frameworks, some of these wonderful resources that they have, and Understanding Impact resources. So thinking about data visualization, community solutions, and regional educational laboratory program. So those are great resources that you can all choose. Again, we will have this available for you. And before you go, please make sure that you give us some feedback, give us some data to go through, and do the Survey Monkey. It is in the chat, so please go to do that today or before you leave. We really need our data as well to collect and also do our own quality improvement. So your data helps us make sure that we are doing the best to offer. And it will not just be for Partnership for Children and Youth, also for SCRI. So they can also look at their data from this workshop. And I think that is all from us. And I will send follow-up emails when the resources are also available online. So you'll have recordings and the slide deck and the resources to follow up with. So thank you again. We'll be in touch, and enjoy your long weekend to come. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, thank you to everyone that was here.